Hello everyone, hope all of you are doing well. I also hope that you have watched my previous videos on Canterbury Tales. I have discussed some of the important topics from this particular block and I have already covered 3 lectures on it, and today lectures is going to be the fourth. So in today's session we are going to discuss the Chaucer's use of irony in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales, and that too in a very systematic manner. Now, prior to this, I would highly recommend all my viewers to go ahead and watch the previous 3 videos in order to connect the dots so that this particular session will be interesting and as well as valuable for you. And also do watch the video till the end, because in today's session, I'm also going to help you out to write your answers in a productive manner in your upcoming term and examination. Now, before we get started, a humble request to all my viewers that kindly do check out the description where you'll find out the links for different playlists, as well as the initial links will be for some interesting videos and some mind refreshing videos narrated in my voice, which covers some stories on love, sacrifice, time travel and much more. Now without any further delay, let's get started. Now let us mark the beginning of the session by understanding what do you mean by irony. Now when a moment of dialogue or plot contradicts what the audience expects from a character or story, then it is said to be irony. Now you see, most of the authors and the poets and the literary workers often use the element or the tool of irony in their work in order to engage the audience. Also sometimes they use irony to portray a particular meaning out of context. Now we have to understand, in Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer has used the tool of irony in a very significant manner. Alright, through his characters, through the storytelling way, lot of things you will find irony has been used. Now in very simple words, if someone wants to understand what do you mean by irony, let me explain it to you. Suppose a person is stuck in a storm and he somehow is able to save his life, and after coming out of the storm he just says to others, what a fine weather it is. Now obviously it was not a fine weather. Now what he is trying to say and what just happened to him are exactly the opposite. Now this is called verbal irony. We'll also discuss the element of verbal irony in this particular lecture. So do watch the lecture till the end, because Chaucer's use of irony in the prologue of the Canterbury Tales is a notable aspect of his storytelling technique. Now this particular way has been used by other authors as well. Now we'll understand all the points how Chaucer has used irony in different manner. In this regard, let us take our first point, that is character descriptions. Now Chaucer's use of irony to describe the characters in a way that often contradicts their actual behavior. Now that is called characters, irony in the characters description. Now for example, the prioress. Now who is a prioress? A woman who is a head of a house of certain order of nuns. That means a prioress is a person who is related to faith. Okay, now here a prioress is described as a modest and refined woman, yet her actions and attire suggest a different, less virtuous persona. How? In the story of the Canterbury Tales, the prioress, the Madame Eglantine, who was the prioress in the Canterbury Tales, is a woman of contradictions who desires to act like a lady of the court, yet she is a woman of faith. That means that her intentions and her line of work both contradict each other. Now this is a very good example of character descriptions irony which was used by Chaucer in his work, that is Canterbury Tales. Now moving ahead, let us talk about satirical portraits. Now what do you mean by satire? Satire is nothing but the use of humor in literature. Now Chaucer employs irony to satirize various social classes and professions. He presents characters like the pardoner and the summoner, who are meant to be figures of authority and piety, but their actions and motives are far from virtuous. This creates a satirical commentary on the church and its representatives. Now, in order to understand this point in a better way, you have to understand what is the story that is related with the pardoner and the summoner. Now, in very simple words, if I have to explain the job of the pardoner and the summoner, it will be something like this: that summoner is supposed to be the person who often calls out to the people to appear in front of the court. Alright, for any reason, it might be some crime or some other reasons. So he is a person who summons others. Okay, that is his responsibility, and both of them are employed under church. And pardoner is a person who is given the authority to grant pardons against some sins, okay, to some person. Now you might be thinking, wow, you just commit sins and just go to the pardoner
and there you can get your pardons against your sins. But again, you will see a very corrupt side of this particular culture that was encouraged by the church back then. Now what happens is that the people who goes to the pardoner in order to get pardons for their sins were often asked to make donations to the church. All right, now that's what we are trying to use here. That's what Chaucer tried to express here, that both the jobs of the pardoner and the summoner were supposed to be the virtuous ones. Okay, they were supposed to be the controlling figure of the church. The way they should work should have been more virtuous. However, through their portraits, that means through their satirical portraits, we can see that there is a hint of corruption. All right, and whatever they do are far from virtuous. Now this particular thing creates a satirical commentary on the church and its representatives. Let's talk about the knight. Now regarding the knight, I have talked so much that all of you must have already known, because the knight's tale we have already discussed in the first lecture, I believe. So we already know about the knight. The knight is described as the epitome of chivalry and honor, but his participation in the pilgrimage reflects the declining values of the knightly class. All right. His inclusion in the group of travelers can be seen as ironic given the moral and the ethical lapses in the other characters. Now let us try to understand again this particular point in very simple words. Now who is a knight? A knight is a person who is entrusted by the king or the head of a particular nation as a protector, okay, as a protector of Christianity, as a protector of faith. Now this particular class of warriors were supposed to fight in the name of religion. All right, and they were given extraordinary privileges, and in our story, the Canterbury Tales, this particular knight has fought the 100 Years' War, and he was a very honorable person and he was very chivalrous. That's why he was given the opportunity to narrate the first story. So we can see that even though the knight was considered to be a prominent figure in the society, he has chosen the pilgrimage. Now that itself is an irony. Okay, in other words, if we try to understand that he was living a life of luxury after fighting in the 100 Wars war and surviving in it. So he was entitled to get all the respect from the society. Having that known, he chose the line of pilgrimage. Okay. Obviously to atone for some of his sins. This is not clearly mentioned in the story, but again we see here that his participation in the pilgrimage again is an irony. Okay, given the moral and ethical lapses in other characters, that such a person who is so deserving and who is so deservingly placed in the convenient status of the society chooses to decline that particular position and join the pilgrimage. However, in the same story, you also see the story of the squire who is the son of the knight who also joins the pilgrimage. However, his character is exactly the opposite of the knight. Now, that is also an irony which you can add in this answer. Now let's move on again and we'll discuss the summoner and the pardoner in a different point. Now in this particular point, what you can write is that these two figures are described in unflattering terms, highlighting their moral corruption. Now I've already told you that their job was supposed to be of virtuous, but however their actions were far from it and it represented more of a corrupt society. The irony lies in the fact that these individuals are responsible for summoning sinners and pardoning their sins, yet they themselves are morally compromised. As I told you that what used to happen in back in that time is that the pardoners used to pardon the person for their sins in exchange for a donation. Okay, the person who is asking for pardons has to donate a particular sum of money to the church. Now in this way, if you engage money and monetary gain in a very virtuous job, then the virtue in that particular pardon is lost. That is why the story of summoner and the pardoner is very important, and their portrayal in the Canterbury Tales can be a huge, hint of use of irony by Geoffrey Chaucer. Moving ahead, let us talk about the social critic. Chaucer used irony to critique the social norms and values of his time. He exposes the hypocrisy and contradictions in the society he portrays, highlighting the disparity between the appearances and reality. Now, this particular point can be well understood with the example of Prioress as well, because she was supposed to be a person of faith, representing faith. However, her actions spoke something else. She wanted to act like a lady of the court, okay, although she was a woman of faith. Now, this is what the discrimination or the hypocrisy and the contradiction comes in true sense, which Chaucer was trying to depict through his Canterbury Tales. Now this is also a very beautiful use of irony. Now let us come to the next point, that is stereotypes. Now we all know what is a stereotype. Stereotype is like a common notion among the people. Alright, now for example, like most of us think that women cannot be good drivers. Now that is a stereotype that we people as a patriarchal society have cultivated through generations. Now obviously that is false. Now most of the stereotypes are often challenged. Now Chaucer plays with stereotypes and the use of irony to subvert them. For instance, let us take the miller, who is supposed to be rough and unrefined character, but he turns out to be clever and witty in his storytelling. This is a very good example of stereotype. Now people who are listening to this particular story are expecting Miller to be very rough and unrefined character. That is the stereotype that they have cultivated. Okay, that is the stereotype that is dominating over their thoughts. But however, the Miller turns out to be very clever and witty in his storytelling. Following this, we have the narrator's position. Now here it is very important to understand that in the pilgrimage, where a lot of pilgrims, 29 pilgrims, were traveling to the shrine of the archbishop, Geoffrey Chaucer has also exclaimed, he has also given his position as the narrator. Now Chaucer is the narrator who employs irony by presenting himself as the unassuming and impartial observer, even though his descriptions and judgments of the characters reveal his own biases and opinions. This creates an ironic distance between the narrator and the events he describes. Now it is very important to understand that Geoffrey Chaucer was accompanying all the pilgrims, and the stories narrated by all the pilgrims were actually heard by Geoffrey Chaucer, and the other way he used to depict it to his viewers. Now with this point, we clearly understand that when you are in the shoes of a narrator, your own biases and your own opinions often reflect in your writing as well. Okay, it might be subconsciously or it might be consciously as well. So this is a very classic example of irony, where the narrator is listening to the story which might depict a different meaning altogether. The characters might be different, but since you have biases and since you have already some hardcore opinions regarding that particular generation, or you have certain ideology that you are following, your way of portrayal will be dominated by your thoughts and your opinions. Okay, although the characters and the stories or the events might be something else. Now let us move on to the next point, which I've already given you an example in the beginning of today's session, that is verbal irony. Now we all know what do you mean by verbal irony by the example that I have just put forward in the initial stages of this particular lecture. Now Chaucer uses verbal irony where characters say one thing but mean another. This can be seen in the interactions among the pilgrims as they exchange banter and engage in subtle verbal jabs. How they exchange banter and engage in subtle verbal jabs. Now it was not of violent nature, but however there was use of verbal irony in these conversations. Now let us come to the last point, that is overall tone. Now the prologue's overall tone is ironic as it sets up the expectation that the pilgrimage will be devout and a pious journey, but the characters and their stories undermine these expectations, revealing the flaws and contradictions of the individuals and the society. Now with this we have to conclude the answer in a very subtle manner by saying that that what we have to understand is that a prologue actually sets the tone for the entire story. Now the prologue of the Canterbury Tales actually sets up the story, that how the pilgrims have started their journey to the shrine of the archbishop. Okay, now this pilgrimage was supposed to be very, very pious, and when they decided to share stories among themselves, these stories should have been very much of virtuous nature. However, what we see is that these stories actually undermine the expectation of the other pilgrims as well as the viewers as well. It reveals a lot of flaws in the society and the contradictions and the dirt in the individual's mind and the society overall. Now with this, Chaucer is actually very beautifully using the tool of irony in the prologue itself. Now if you have to summarize the entire answer in a proper way, then you have to write that the Chaucer's use of irony in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales serve as a powerful tool for social critique and character development. It allows him to expose the gap between the appearances and reality and provides a satirical lens through which to view the medieval society of his time. So this is a wrap on today's video, guys. I hope you people have totally understood the use of irony by Chaucer in the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. Now, this particular question can be expected in your term and examinations for 20 marks essay type question. In case if you have any other difficulty understanding any particular point of today's session, do feel free to comment in the comment section. I'll definitely try to address it. And also a humble reminder to all my viewers that do kindly check out the links that is given in the description. You will find the playlist for different MEG papers, as well as the initial links are given of some beautiful stories narrated in my voice, which are some stories on love, sacrifice, time travel and much more. So do go ahead and watch those videos as well. And if you happen to like those videos, do hit the like button and do consider to share the channel as well. And also do consider to check out our social community handles, that is our Facebook page and our Facebook group, where we regularly update IGNOU's notifications. Till we meet next time, God bless you and thank you all.